Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you in here today, and welcome back after the spring break. I know I didn't give anybody any warning, but I took a little bit of time off to go and hang out with the family, and we took a little road trip and did a bunch of camping. So, yeah, it was great to get away for a little bit and back at it now. So hopefully you guys have been taking the time to maybe catch up if you were behind a little bit with the course. And everyone's doing well out there. I know we're rolling into spring. Today is like super cool out today and rainy, so not feeling very spring-like today. But anyways, first of all, before we get into the Q&A today, I just want to have a huge thanks to the sponsor, PaperPot Co., sponsoring the entire course. And I keep saying this, but it wouldn't be possible without them. So I really do appreciate everything that they do to support this and to support me with this course. And so I recommend you check out Diego's podcast. In fact, you probably know about Farm Small, Farm Smart, but he also launched a new podcast called Carrot Cash Flow, which is all about business farm stuff. And also go check out tools and equipment and stuff that they have over on their website and additional resources for the course. So paperpot.co/Josh. Go check out all that stuff and definitely let them know that you're liking the course and getting a lot out of it and those sorts of things. That would be cool for them to hear that from you. So thanks big time to PaperPot for sponsoring everything. Anyways, like usual on the live Q&As, I will take questions related to the previous module, which was module 7, which was all about crop planning. So I'll take as many questions as possible about that topic. Hopefully you guys got a chance to see it. And then at the end, I'll open up for general questions. There's no specific time. It's just kind of, if I run out of questions about the crop planning, then we'll go to general questions. But as you guys know, I'm here every week following the module. So yeah. Anyways, next module is module 8, which is about tunnels. And so that'll be coming up soon. And just cranking away at these. They take a lot longer than I sort of anticipated, but they're great. I've been having a good time with this and sort of consolidating everything, and just I just realized like how much information and like value is in each video, and it's just like I watch them back and I'm like, wow, there's so much in there. So hopefully you're learning a bunch and you're enjoying this, and I appreciate all the support. Everyone's been sending me lots of nice messages and encouraging thoughts and everything. So I appreciate that a lot. Okay, so I am here. Let's see, this looks a little bit loud. I am here to talk about crop planting. So what questions do you guys have? And again, if I skip over your question, it's because it's not related, and I will then, as I said, open up to general questions at the end of the Q&A. Sweden, Ukraine, cool of you to be here right now. Let's see. Hopefully you guys are doing all right out there. Welcome if you're just joining in. We're taking questions right now about crop planting. Hopefully most of you have planned out at least a good section of your season. I think crop planting is one of those things that takes a lot of practice. I mentioned that quite a bit in the module, but learning each crop and how long they take, especially in your system, and then learning how to get that output lined up with what you need to sell I think it's one of the hardest things. People ask you a lot about crop planting, and it's, as I said, it's one of those things you have to do a lot, take notes, learn how long things take, and even different varieties take different amounts of time. So all things you have to keep in mind. Let's see here. All right, Levi, thanks for the question. When you don't have enough space to grow everything you would like, what would your main focus be? Great question, Levi. So let me turn this around a little bit, because when you say grow everything you like, is that because you're growing stuff that you just want to grow, or growing stuff that has a big demand and you can sell? So that's the question. If you're Levi, if you're growing for profit, or you're just growing for your family, if you are growing for profit, then it's best to look at, first of all, what do you make the most money on, per foot, per month, that kind of thing, right? Like if you can make twice as much money with a certain crop in the same bed, like you probably want to focus on that. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to sell all of those products, right? So sometimes the products that the restaurants want may not be the most well, I'm talking about restaurants, but your customers, maybe some of the products that they want the most may not necessarily be the most profitable. So it's a complicated equation, and you kind of have to sort that out. But yeah, I always recommend growing less and growing more succession. So that's why, for my model in my farm, I've said many times, it's like, I don't have a lot of beds, so I just really limit the number of crops because, if I have 24 beds, let's say I have 10 crops, well, I can only really have 2 beds of each crop. So I'm going to have a lot of gaps in those things coming out, even if they're spaced out well. So I recommend focusing on the ones that make you the most money and keep your customers happy. That's probably what I'd focus on. And then get those dialed into the amount that you need. So if you need like 50 pounds of lettuce a week, or you need 100 pounds of lettuce a week, or you need 50 pounds of carrots a week, like once you dial those things in, then you can, and if you have space after you're taking care of all that, that's when you start to add in other crops. But it's always good to have a little bit of experimentation in there too. Okay, growing mainly high turnover, high value crops, but not enough space to grow all the high turnover, high value market crops. Oh, okay. So then you have to just determine. I'm guessing the question is like, which ones do you grow? That depends on your market. So if you are going to a farmer's market, like look at what people are not bringing. That's what you should be growing for those high value crops. Talk to your customers, see what they want. Like, they may not want salad mix. They may just want baby root vegetables. They may want baby greens. There's a lot of this like cart before the horse or chicken and egg kind of thing. You have to kind of use your customers and your market demand to determine which crops will be best for you to grow. Hopefully I'm answering your question. Hi, Miguel. Dennis, thanks for the question. How many flips can you get during a growing season? For me, I can get a lot of flips, depending on the crops, right? So like carrots are in the ground for 2 or 3 months. Lettuce is in the ground for 6 to 8 weeks, probably. In that case, I could probably get over 4 flips in a bed, but I tend to like, as I've said, I like follow one crop with a crop from a different family. So yeah, probably like 4, I don't know, on average. If you're doing a lot of baby greens, you can flip them even more often because they grow so quick. Like if you grow arugula or like radish, they're like 3-4 weeks. So you could get more than 4 flips in a bed. But as it averages out, I'd probably say about 4, I think. I'd have to go and take a look. But some stuff stays in the ground a long time, so it depends. I guess you'd have to think about an average. Lamond, hopefully I'm saying that right. Wow, we got people from all over the world. Awesome. Big Mike, thank you so much. So I admitted I am not the best at record keeping, so I need to work on this myself. I don't have a good system. So as I said, I'm not the super organized. I'm not the just wing it kind of guy. I'm kind of in the middle. So what I do is I keep track of what's in the ground, and I kind of like do it mentally. I don't have a strict thing that I record. And I think that's also the point I want to make with that is like, I'm not perfect at all this stuff, and I have ways to improve, and I'll let you know like when I'm not doing something well and things that I could do better. So yeah, maybe you guys have some ideas about how to do that. I'd probably say a spreadsheet's probably good because it's free. I think there is software out there. I don't know. I usually try to keep things really simple. It could even be a notebook. I mean, depending on how big your farm is, if it's pretty small and you have, let's say 50 bed flips a year or 80 bed flips a year, you can just go through and look, all right, bed 7 was planted this day, harvested this day, got this much yield, and you'll just have that record, and then you can kind of get an idea of like, oh, if I plant in September, it takes 3 months, those sorts of things. So I don't have a great system for you, Mike, because I'm not really good at it. So maybe some other people do. But yeah, that's my story. Hi, Jillian. Is there a resource somewhere with an exhaustive list of crops, days to maturity? Every seed company, if you go on their website, you can look at, days to maturity. Like I showed in the video, in the module, if you go, usually it's on the seed packet too. If it's not, it's on the website. You go look at whatever you want, it'll say 60 days or whatever. So I know Johnny's has that, and they also have like germination temperatures on there too, so that can be helpful. But I don't know of like one big resource like spreadsheet chart thing that would have all information. And it depends a lot on the varieties too, because like even like carrots, they can vary like quite a bit in terms of how long they take to grow. So it really depends on the variety, and that's probably why there isn't like one big chart for you to use. So I would just, I mean, you got to learn each one of your crops. So as you go to select varieties, for example, if you're picking out seeds, you also want to look at the cultivars and use that to help determine like, can I do a 75-day carrot, or do I need a 60-day carrot? Like those kinds of things. So that's probably the best way to figure that out. Hey, Ken. Yeah, Mike was just asking me about this to keep track of everything. I should have put this in the video, and I forgot, but it was in like my original crop planning video that I did on my YouTube channel. I just have a whiteboard, and it's basically like a visual representation of the farm. Like there's a space for each bed, and I had this at Raleigh City Farm too. This is a carryover from my days as a brewer. We had whiteboards up in the brewery, and each space was like a different tank. And so we'd write which beer it was and what day it went into the tank and what day it was transferred, and any like little notes like, oh, filtered or added, different like dry hopped or additives or whatever. So I got used to that system of like using a whiteboard for that. So that's what I use. I have a whiteboard in my garage, and it's just like bed, date, and then there's a big space. And I just write in like what day I planted and what it is. And that way I can easily like go and look and say like, oh, when did I plant those carrots? Oh, that was 3 weeks ago, or whatever. Like, oh, they should have been germinated by now. There must be something wrong. That's what's helpful for me. I don't have like an electronic system to help you with that, or any sort of spreadsheets or things like that. But that's my system. As I said, I'm not like super organized, and I'm not like a total disaster. I'm kind of in the middle. So that's sort of what my thing is. And I said I should be better about like taking that information and then recording that somewhere else. Maybe that's a goal for next season for me. But as I said, I plan out my transplants, and then I direct seed. It's kind of one of those things that like you kind of get a sense of after a while too. I mean, you can be really organized and know exactly when you're gonna plant stuff. And I probably should work on that as I keep saying, to get my output more consistent, because there's times where I'll think I'm behind and I'll plant a whole bunch, and then it'll all catch up to me, and especially as the season ramps up. Like right now I have like way too much lettuce, and that's totally my fault. Oh, hey, Fraser. Oh, compost questions. Well, thank you. I'm glad the course has been good for you. Let's see here. Romina, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. Yeah, so talking to your local food co-op or grocery store can tell you a lot about supply and demand in your local area. Absolutely, yeah. Depending on where you're selling to, if it's a farmer's market, if it's a co-op, if you're doing restaurants, like for a farmer's market, you can walk around, you can see what people have, right? And you can talk to customers and say, hey, was there something like, that you're looking for that you couldn't find? Like, is there something I could grow like this summer or next year? Or, get to know your customers. And for chefs, it's just a very like straightforward conversation. My chef will be like, hey, can you grow beets for me? I'm like, yeah, sure. Or can you grow radish? Or, when are those squash going to be ready? And so it's pretty straightforward for that kind of stuff. If you're doing a CSA box, you want to focus on high retention, so you want to really listen to your customers and make adjustments for following seasons, because then you're going to keep them happy. Like if you give them kale every other week and they're like, oh, I don't really eat a lot of kale, I'd rather have more spinach or whatever. So those are the kinds of things you have to think about when you're determining your crop plan, is like what's going to sell or what your customers want. So thanks for that comment. Yeah, record keeping is the hardest. Yeah, as I said, Jillian, it's all on the website. So if you're looking for a certain crop, just go look it up. It's all free information, and it's always available. So Farmer Brad, Clyde's Garden Planner. I never heard about that, but there you go. There's a recommendation for you guys. Sorry, just reading through comments here. Has everybody gotten their crop planting done for this season? I guess that's the biggest question. But I can't stress enough to have just some extra crops that you can direct seed. That is super handy. If you didn't get a chance to watch the module, I noticed that when I have an open bed, I'd rather plant it with something. So carrots are a good one because carrots always sell really well. Baby greens like arugula or something like that where you can just rip a bed or two through with your seeder when you have an open bed. And another thing, which I mentioned briefly in that module, is to have extra transplants so you can sort of fill in areas that either something died or something didn't germinate well, and that allows you to have a lot more flexibility and just bring up the yield a little bit. It might look a little funky, but whatever. Head lettuce is a great one, especially if you're going to farmer's market because, if you have 30, 40 heads that are just filled in one bed of carrots that didn't germinate and you go through and chop those off and you bring those to the farmer's market, then, you can just bring head lettuce that week in addition to whatever else you have. So there's a lot of stuff like that for sure. But what I've realized, and I've said this plenty of times, is I've really dialed in the crops that I'm growing because they work well in my system, they sell well, and it allows me to have that succession planting so that I kind of constantly have a steady stream of output for my customers. All right, not a lot of questions in here today. Maybe you guys don't know, are you having trouble getting started, or what can I help you guys with crop planting? That's I have to say it's one of those things that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially succession planting, because having consistent output is tough, and I think that's really the thing about your experience and keeping track of what happens so that you can anticipate that for future plantings. Farm My Yard app, is that another good one, Brad? It's cool that people are designing this stuff. I don't know about you, but I feel like there's an app for everything, and I just want to minimize as much as possible. But whatever works for you, any sort of system. Joy, could you help with the weather? Wish I could, Joy. The weather's not cooperating. Yeah, so that's a great point. Let's talk about that for a second. So when the weather doesn't cooperate, what do you do? So I've had a problem with this because you'll have, let's say, starts in your nursery that are ready to go out, and it's too cold or it's too wet or something's not growing fast enough that you needed to put the crop in the ground, right? Like if you have plants that need to go out and the bed is full, what do you do, right? Like what do you do with those plants? So that becomes tricky, but I think one thing for cold weather, of course, is tunnels and row cover. That helps a lot to be able to plant out a little bit earlier. Also have backup transplants because sometimes your transplants will go too long and then they get too big, they get too leggy, or they are not too leggy necessarily, but they struggle, and then they don't work when you transplant out because they get weak, they run out of nutrients, those sorts of things. One thing I like a lot is using soil blocks. I'm talking about transplants now. They help me a lot because they'll hang out a little bit longer than the starts would work in a normal cell tray because they air prune. So I get a lot more flexibility there with how long they're in the nursery for. So that's been helpful for me. So if I miss my transplant by a week or two, it's like not the end of the world usually, as long as I'm keeping everything watered. So that's something to consider. Anything you can do for season extension can help. So, if it's, as I said, tunnels, row cover, those sorts of things will be good for getting seeds to germinate, keeping things alive if you're planting them out early. That stuff helps a lot, and it just takes away a lot of the stress. But if you don't have that, then I would say make sure you have extra starts, and you just have to roll with the punches because that's the weather. There's not much you can do about it. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine snow right now. It's like, if you guys don't know, I grew up in Boston and also lived in Colorado for 5 years. I'm definitely used to snow, but this is like what, 7, coming up on 7 years in North Carolina now. Like I couldn't even, we get like usually one snowstorm a year, and it's like crazy here. Everything shuts down for like a week. Hi, Ken. How do you deal with and recover from crop failure? Do you mean emotionally or physically? No, I'm just kidding. So, more snow? That's crazy. It is pretty cold out today. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. And tomorrow night's going to be just above freezing here. So, with crop planting or crop failure, one thing you have to do is just understand that it happens, and you need to accept that. So I'll talk about the mental thing first, and then I'll talk about the emotional part, and then I'll talk about the physical part. So remember that even the best farmers have crop failures from time to time. So don't get too beat up about it, because I think that I know that personally, when I had a lot of crop failures, I would get very upset about it and take it very personal. Like it was like a personal failure. So keep that in mind, that gardeners and farmers kill more plants than anybody because we plant more things. So just keep that in mind. In terms of like physically or like plan wise on your farm, as I said, having backups is great. So I tend to have more starts than I need. That's always helpful, because if something doesn't go to plan, I have a backup, or as I said, I have stuff that I can direct seed that I know will sell. I do limit my number of crops, because I used to just be like, oh, I have all these seeds, I'll just plant a bed of, I don't know, make up something. But now if I have an open bed or something fails and I don't have anything to go in, like I'll just plant carrots, because they can live a little bit longer before you harvest them. They sell well. You'll find the crops like that for where you're selling, and you'll just have those on hand. I think those are the best strategies. Have extra starts. Have seeds you can direct sow into the ground that are just simple and will sell. And then if you don't have either of those that'll work, what I'd recommend is just covering the bed with a piece of landscape fabric until you can plant into it. So keep the ground covered. Remember, that's one of the things about living soil. So sometimes, they'll just like something will, like right now, like all my kale bolted, and I'm going to have to take it out, but I don't have anything ready to go in there because I was expecting it to go a couple more weeks. So we'll take it out and then just lay down a piece of landscape fabric until I can plant into it. So hopefully that was helpful. Just remember that you're not alone with crop failure. It happens to everybody. I don't know if this really has to do with crop planting, but I did bring up soil blocks. So I find that once they get leggy, they don't do great, because once you take them out of the nursery and you start hardening them off, and I'll talk about hardening off and stuff in a future module, but sometimes they're just too weak to go out, and so sometimes it's not worth it for the effort to prep the bed, plant it, and then they don't make it, or they're really weak and they have low yield. Sometimes it's better to just to get new starts going. Also, if you are having leggy starts, then you need to address that, because leggy means not enough light. So if you're growing inside under lights, you either don't have the right kind of lights, not enough of the light, or not as many hours as you need. If you're in your nursery, maybe your nursery is too shaded or it's not in the right spot. So if you're getting leggy starts, that's because you don't have enough light. So you need to address that. If the starts get too big, that's a different story. Depends on what they are. And those sorts of things. Like tomatoes, I like to get them pretty big before they go out, and then I take off the leaves up to a certain point and then bury them really deep, because that creates other roots to shoot out. But if there are other things like lettuce or smaller transplants, Yeah, don't transplant out leggy stuff. They're probably not going to do well. Think about what's causing the legginess, and try to address that. Yeah, Mike. I used to want to direct seed everything too. Like a great example is beets. Like I was just like, yeah, you got to direct seed beets. That's what you do. And then how many times I planted out beets, they came up either too strong or not strong enough. Germination wasn't good. And then I'm like, you know what? Like I started transplanting them, and my yield is like very consistent, and I get nice big beets, and it takes some time. And I can't stress enough the fact that like when you are doing transplants, you get such a bigger yield because you have stuff growing, before it's even in the ground. Because you have the transplants going in your nursery, you have something else in the bed. When that's ready, the transplants go in. They already had 3 or 4 weeks to grow. So huge difference for me. I also find I use way less seed because I'm not just ripping beds of seed. I'm making soil blocks. I mean, I'm paying for the soil block, the potting mix, but it is what it is. So yeah, huge fan of transplanting. And I have to say, like, I think a lot of people get intimidated by transplanting first because, if you're talking about lettuce is, 300-400 transplants, and it's a lot of work. You get really fast at it. And I'll talk about some of those things in the transplanting module, but yeah, it doesn't take that much time to transplant after you've done it a bunch. So huge benefit for me for sure. Yes, definitely consider overwintered crops. I'm going to be, the next module is about winter growing. Yeah, the winter crops they taste the best, hands down. Like everything I've grown in the wintertime, carrots, lettuce, kale, they grow evenly. They're sweeter. If you can, winter crops are awesome. And a lot of the things, you can actually crush it in terms of restaurant sales, farmers markets if they're open in the winter, because most people don't grow in the winter. So that really gives you a leg up with your competition as well, as having that stuff in the wintertime. And I was going into restaurants in December, January, February with like fresh lettuce, and they can't get that anywhere. If they do, it's like all hydroponic indoor kind of stuff that's grown, which a lot of them use and are fine with. But if you can bring those kind of products to market, yeah, absolutely, and they do taste so much better. One day of cloudy won't make them leggy, as long as they're uncovered. Yeah, crop failure. I should do a whole section on that. But yeah, as I said, it happens to all of us, guys. So don't like feel like a personal failure. If I can get that across to you at all, I feel like that happens to me a lot. Not super related. I'll go over nursery stuff in another module, but peppers take a long time to germinate. Like sometimes it can be like 2 weeks to germinate a pepper seed. And so you just got to be patient. And if you're overwatering, you'll know, because sometimes like you'll get that like green stuff growing, the mold or whatever that's growing, algae, whatever. You'll see if there's too much moisture. The best thing is just feel the blocks, or feel the soil if you're in trays. Put your hands in it, feel it. Like you'll know when it's moist or when it's dry. If it's soaking wet, it's not going to work. And then also the other thing is temperature. I think a lot of people forget about that. Is the temperature you need for pepper seeds. If it's too cold, they probably won't germinate. So yeah, those are all the things. But peppers take a long time, and the other thing about peppers is that, like, for you to grow them, I don't know where you are, Neo Amish podcast, but if you are somewhere more north than me, you're going to have to start the peppers super, super early, and it's probably pretty cold out when you're starting those seeds. So unless you're starting inside, check on the temperature for germination. And don't give up on them. They do take a long time. So if they didn't germinate in like 10, 12 days, like they might take a little bit longer. Peppers take forever. Peppers are also an awesome crop. So Hey, Ken, thanks for the question. How do you manage customer expectations when your supply doesn't match their demand? This comes from, I'll just speak about restaurants because that's where the world I'm in, and then maybe I'll hit on some of the other stuff too. So the biggest thing is communication and education with your customers. So if a restaurant is ordering from you, they obviously have a desire to buy locally and buy from a small farmer, and they need to understand what that means. And they will over time because, like I'll come in and go, hey guys, or I'll text my chefs, like I don't have kale at all bolted. And after a while, they'll know what that means. They'll go, oh yeah, it was like crazy hot this last week. That makes sense. So when you're talking with customers that are paying for this sort of hyper-local food, they want to buy this kind of stuff. They're paying probably more money than they would spend, or they definitely are spending more money than they would spend off of a big food delivery truck. So to them, they're really interested in investing in it. So a little bit of education there helps a lot. There was one week where it was crazy cold here, and I was like, hey guys, the lettuce is not great this week, or I didn't have the yield I expected, or I need to take a week off because it's so cold and the crops didn't look good. And they're like, yeah, I totally get it. It was really cold this week, and part of it is getting the customers that want to understand that and are willing to work with you. So that's my experience with the chefs. I work with some amazing people at the moment. I'm just really grateful for my customers and their understanding. But the other part of it is, if you're a totally flaky person and a flaky farmer and you're not consistent on a regular basis, then they're going to have more trouble with you if you keep saying, oh, this, oh, the bugs ate this, or this thing bolted, or this crop failed. If you're constantly giving them those excuses, I think it's going to be really hard. But if you're really consistent and then something happens for 1, 2, or 3 weeks and you let them know ahead of time, they're usually okay with it. At least they seem to be okay with it. I'm sure they're not happy about it because it makes their life a little bit more challenging, but they'll substitute in with other things. So, the chefs I said that are wanting to work with local farmers, I think are down for learning those kinds of things. Thanks for the question, Ken. All right, Nikki, do you crop out entire beds each week or plan to harvest a single bed over multiple weeks? How does this impact your succession planting? Great question, Nikki. I did talk about this in the module. It depends on the crop. So, and the time of year as well. So right now, yes, it does affect that. I know that in the spring, I get huge yields on lettuce, for example. And so I am not going to need a whole bed of lettuce in 1 week. It might give me 2 beds of 2 weeks worth. So you have to keep that in mind that if I need, let's say I need 50 pounds of lettuce a week. I keep using these numbers, but they're easy to remember. If I need 50 pounds of lettuce a week and I think I can get 80 to 100 pounds off of a bed, well, then I only need to plant 1 bed every other week, if that makes sense, so that you can have 50 pounds every week. If you're pulling carrots out of a bed and you know that you need 50 pounds a week and you can get, let's say, 150 pounds of carrots out of a bed, well, then you don't need to plant a bed of carrots every week. You need to plant a bed of carrots every 3 weeks. So you need to understand that. Now, at different times of the year, it's going to be different. So summertime yields for lettuce for me are really bad. I get much smaller yields and those sorts of things. So, yeah, you have to keep that in mind. And that's part of this taking notes and learning from year to year and understanding that. It's not a perfect science. Sometimes you think you got it all dialed in and then you get whole bunch of really warm weather or a bunch of snow or whatever, and it totally screws you up. So it's not perfect. That's one of the hardest things about farming, is that it's this ongoing changing thing. It's tough for sure. Hopefully that explained my succession planting. So it will change at different parts of the year and depending on the type of crop for sure. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. Yeah, after a while, if your customers are flaking on you, then it's probably best to find more customers for sure. I had that trouble a lot with microgreens when I was doing microgreens. Not to say that all situations are like this, but I had a lot of times I'd grow stuff and then they'd be like, "No, I don't need that." I'm like, well, you said you needed that every week, so I grew it for you. But yeah, keep in mind you can move on from customers and those sorts of things. All right. Great questions today, guys. Thank you for coming, and also huge thanks to PaperPot Co. for sponsoring the course and for all their support. So highly recommend you check out what they have for sale over there. Let them know you're enjoying the course. Check out Diego's podcast, especially his new one called Carrot Cash Flow. It's all about farm business stuff. Diego's an amazing content creator and podcaster, so go check out all that stuff. Let them know you're enjoying the course, and I really appreciate everything. So, all right, let's see. We have other questions about crop planting. Do you want to open this up for general questions? I think I'd be cool for that. So let me know. Has anyone been listening to the, I'm just curious if anyone's been listening to the modules on podcast form. And I keep forgetting to mention that, but it is available over on the Small Farm Smart podcast. It's available as a podcast. So if you don't want to watch on YouTube, or you just want to catch up or re-listen to things and you don't feel like pulling out your YouTube app and it's more convenient to listen to it through the podcast app, you can do that as well. So it's available in every form. And then the written resources are also available on the PaperPot Co. website. So lots of different things there for you guys to absorb this information. All right. Doesn't seem like we have a lot more crop planting questions. I'm happy to open up to general questions. So please, let me know if you have questions. Just fire them in. I'll be here for a little while taking questions on whatever. Oh, cool. You listened on the podcast. All right. Nice. I know a lot of people also just hit play on YouTube and then just listen to it, even though they're not watching, which is fine. There's a lot of time where I'm just talking. Some modules are more interactive in terms of actual visual stuff. Some are not. But my main outlet is YouTube, so I put it on YouTube. All right, so what's my process on hardening off crops? All right, so right now I don't. Because I'm going from a tunnel to a tunnel. So I've found that I don't really have to do that. And so hardening off, if you guys don't know, is the process in which you're taking baby transplants and getting them ready to go out into the ground. And so there's a couple things that play into that. One is the sun. Because if you're growing under lights specifically, like if you're have an indoor nursery and you're growing under lights, the sunshine is going to be way stronger than the lights, so it needs time to adjust. Also, the wind. So if you have your plants in an area where there's not a lot of wind flow or airflow, the plant like stems and roots are not going to be super strong. And so when you put them outside, they're going to blow around, they're going to get damaged and get pretty weak and get stressed out. So you want to make the transition as smooth as possible. So when you think about it this way, like what are the things that are different from your inside environment to your outside environment, and then sort of like ease them out to that situation. So a lot of people, what they do is they'll have like a couple tables outside of their greenhouse or an area that's slightly, next to their greenhouse they can cover and uncover. Or something like that, and that allows you to, start with a couple hours and the next day add a couple more hours and just get them used to the environment beforehand. You can also, especially if you run out of time, if you're planting into tunnels, you could take your trays and just put them in the tunnel they're going into for a couple days and just hand water them. I've done that before too. But you need to ease them out. Another thing that's helpful is having airflow where you're doing your starts. I think a lot of times, as I said, it's the sunlight intensity. It's also the wind. So if you have airflow where your plants are starting, they will be much stronger going out into the field. For me, my nursery greenhouse has huge fans in it, so there's always wind in there. Most of the time they're running at least during part of the day, so I get good airflow, so the plants are kind of moving around a little bit, so they're a little bit stronger going out. So you want to make sure that you give them the easiest transition. You want them strong as possible as they're going out. So, and make sure they're not too small also. Make sure they're nice and hardy, I think is another thing for sure. Having a strong transplant game will really help you get good yields in the field, because if your transplants are weak going out in the field, they're not going to they're not going to grow quickly. They're going to struggle. The yields are going to be less. And I also have to say that soil blocks have been instrumental. Like I've noticed so much less transplant shock using soil blocks also, just because I'm not like pulling on the roots and those sort of things. So hopefully that was helpful. If you keep in mind though, you're trying to transition it and get it used to it. That's what you have to think about. Everything Florida, what's some good crop starters as a beginner market gardener farmer? Lettuce is always good. Good demand for lettuce everywhere and good amounts of money for it. If you're in Florida, you're going to be thinking a lot more warm weather crops or taking the summer off. So that's something you have to consider. But my favorite crops are lettuce, carrots, and beets. That's what I grow most of the time, and I do pretty well. The best thing though is it's going to be a mixture of what grows well for you and what you can sell. So sometimes it's not necessarily what you think will be good, but if you have some customers that want a whole bunch of radishes, then grow radishes. It'll depend on what you're trying to sell. But as I said, most market gardeners, market farmers are getting started. Lettuce mix is definitely one of the things because the value is there for sure. Carrots are a great crop too. So those are my favorites. That's what I grow. Hey Ron, thanks for tuning in and for the kind words. So my nutrients. So I think it was module, I can't remember now, 5 or 6 about my no-till practices. I talk about my bed flips. So the compost, I had 5 gallon buckets of compost. So that's by volume, 25 gallons of compost. And then I had 3.5 pounds. So that's by weight of my dry my fertilizer mix. So go check out that module, but it's one is volume, one is weight. Christoph, what is my opinion on, I'm guessing wind strip trays? I think that's what you're trying to say. Wind strips are cool. I've never used them. I meant to try them when I visited Jesse. He's like, I have some extra, take some home. And then we just forgot. I meant to try them because they're kind of a hybrid between regular trays and soil blocks. If you guys don't know what they are they exclusively sold from Neversink? I'm not sure. He brought them back. They were produced by a different company back in the day. But basically, they're like a cell tray with more holes in it that don't have stuff in it, so it has more airflow and stuff. I know people that swear by them that have converted their whole system over to it. So if you don't like soil blocking and you want some of those benefits, I think wind strip trays are great. I just personally haven't used them, but I know some really great growers that swear by them. So and just have converted their whole system over to it, even though it was very expensive. So I've heard great things, but you got to try and see what works best for you and what you like to do and your results and those sorts of things. But from what I've heard, they're awesome, but they are very pricey for sure. Can I plant directly in partially composted mixed wood chips, fully chopped tree? There are plenty of earthworms. I would not do that. If there is an overabundance of wood chips, then most of the nitrogen is going to be tied up, especially if you're planting, the kinds of crops we're talking about for market gardening. If you're planting trees in there, maybe a different story, or some other, I don't know, there's probably other crops or perennial things or something that you might be able to put in there. But for market gardening stuff, no, you don't want the wood chips incorporated. If you're going to use compost that's generated from that, it has to be fully broken down, and you probably have to add some nitrogen to it if you're composting it. So I know a lot of people love the Back to Eden garden method because they've seen people do it, but you have to realize that took many years of things breaking down and other things and biology and nitrogen that they're adding into it. So I would not expect good results of planting into partially broken down wood chips. Hi, Reggie. Eastern North Carolina get very windy where I live. So this is funny. The what's it called? The next module is all about tunnels, and I talk about this, but I'm happy to talk about it now because you asked me. Where I live, you guys have seen my farm. It's very it's surrounded by trees, and it's not very windy here. Of course, we do get some windy days, but it's pretty sheltered. I have no problem with the wind in my tunnels. From what I know and what I've heard from people is that the Quonset tunnels will have, because they're round, so the wind will just blow over them a lot easier. Versus I have the Gothic tunnels, the pointy ones. I've heard those are not as good in the wind. What I recommend though is you just call Farmer's Friend. If you're thinking about buying them, call them. They have customers all over the world. They've sold I don't even know how many thousands of tunnels at this point. And they're really smart and they have lots of good engineers over there and they know what's going on. So I would call them and say, hey, I get winds like this. I live in this area. And they'll probably know a farmer near you that's had a similar experience. And they'll say, hey, yeah, this is probably the best tunnel. You probably need these extra anchors or this extra ground support. I would definitely just hit them up and let them know what all your concerns are, and they'll let you know, like, this will work, this won't work, or these are the extra steps you need to do. But I haven't had any problem with them on my property here. One thing is, if you're gonna get a big, heavy windstorm, make sure you close up your tunnel really well and seal it, because the one time that we did lose plastic was at Raleigh City Farm, and one of the sides wasn't attached very well and it was flapping, and the wind came in and then just lifted the plastic off and just ripped it up. So the best thing you do is, like, if you're going to get a heavy windstorm, is close everything up really tight so the wind can't get in and lift the plastic off. But again, reach out to your manufacturer for your greenhouses or your tunnels, and they'll let you know, like, what works. Amanda, my soil block recipe, I buy potting mix, so I don't bother mixing it. Is it great? If you guys aren't following the No-Till Growers channel, go check that out. I've contributed a lot to that channel over the last few years, but Jesse just put out a video about how he doesn't make his own potting mix either, and you should go check that out. There's a lot of great reason for not even bothering with that, so I just buy whatever I can that's really good. I have been lately using Coast of Maine's, one of their products, I forget which one. I buy it locally at my local farm store. I've used all sorts of stuff. Happy Frog worked great. Tilth Soil, if you can get their stuff, they're out of Ohio. They've sponsored my YouTube channel, and I've tried their stuff. It was awesome. If you can find potting mix that's compost based, that's what I love, because it has a lot more biology. But pay extra for good potting mix, because you'll have healthier starch, you'll have bigger yields. And the other thing that people don't think about is that when you are transplanting into your beds, whatever's in that potting mix substrate that you're putting in your beds is also an amendment. So if there's trace minerals, if there's extra nutrition or micronutrients or whatever, like, that will get into your bed and feed the soil. So pay good money for a good potting mix. Huge fan of that. Yeah, I usually, probably buy one of the best things I can and spend the money on it. It's like not a big difference if you think about it in the course of the terms of a year, for sure. And the other thing about doing your own soil mix recipe is, like, it's hard to mix it. It really is hard to mix it. And you might need some other thing to do that. So the amount of time it takes to figure that out, get all the ingredients, mix it, just go buy bags of potting mix. And this goes for, like, not just potting mix, but I talk about, like, buying compost and, like, buying stuff that would take me way longer, and I'd probably wind up with an inferior product. Like, I pay someone to do that. So I've been using Coast of Maine to answer your question. Hey, Spiros, thank you so much. Oh, specializing in rare and tropical fruit. Okay. Oh, but you want to start market gardening. Yeah, so that's a great place to start, for sure. Yeah, we were just talking about wind strips and soil blocks. I personally do prefer soil blocks. I did make a soil blocking video if you guys are interested. And as I usually say, if you're interested in a certain topic, I've probably made a video on it. So go to my YouTube channel. There's a search box on the upper right when you're looking at the screen. You can type in soil blocks or irrigation or lettuce or whatever, and all the videos will show up. So I haven't tried wind strips, but this year I committed to soil blocks, and I've only used soil blocks, not this year, but 2021 and this year. They're all wrapping together, especially because my season is like fall through spring. So anyways, I love soil blocks. I've never seen transplants start as quickly in the ground with the least amount of transplant shock. I know a lot of people are critical about soil blocks because they take time to put together. But if you get the big stand-up blocker and you get good at it, like after you do it a few times, you'll learn the moisture content and sort of the strategy. It goes pretty quickly. And I find that the amount of time that you took to build the soil blocks when you're starting your seeds kind of cancels out to how fast it is to transplant them, because you literally don't have to, like, pull them out of the trays, or you just literally pick up the block, put it in the ground, pick up the block, put it in the ground. It's super easy. So love soil blocks. Huge fan. Uh, there's definitely other lettuce varieties out there. Muir, M-U-I-R, is a great one for summer growing. It tends to be the most bolt resistant I've found. Extra misting, shade cloth, those kinds of things. But if it doesn't grow where you are, then grow something else. You know what I mean? Rambler, so companion planting. All right, so this I will cover this in a future module, but if you're curious, type in Interplanting in the search engine. I did a video about that. So I don't consider myself doing a lot of companion planting. Companion planting to me is something that people put crops together that sort of help each other and benefit each other. I don't do a lot of that. You know, I've heard of like people putting like marigolds next to tomatoes, for example, to help with pests, or, you know, like the Three Sisters garden where they use, you know, the peas, you know, they use each other to grow on each other and provide nitrogen and all that stuff. So I don't do a lot of that. I find that in a production environment, it's easier for me to do an interplant that makes sense in terms of spacing, sunlight, and days to maturity and those kinds of things. So I was doing some like green onions with lettuce was one I like to do. I haven't done them lately, but I've whittled down my crop section. But like, for example, if I'm going to grow tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, things that are in the ground for a long time, that's generally like one row down the middle of a 30-inch bed, I will interplant along the sides of that. So I'll put in lettuce heads or beets or something like that that'll grow in like, you know, 4 or 6 weeks. I could pull out by the time that the main crop gets big enough and starts shading out down below. I get an extra half a bed's worth or 2/3 of a bed worth out of what's next to them. So a lot of what I do is what I call interplanting. I don't really think of it as like ones that necessarily benefit each other in some biological way. But if you're like more of a homesteading situation or you want to experiment more, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. But for me, it's mostly about like how much food can I get out of this small space that I'm working with. And I focus on living soil, so keep the ground covered, keep it planted, disturb as little as possible, and create diversity. Those things is what I focus on, that, and just feeding the soil constantly with compost and amendments and living plants. That's my strategy. There are lots of ways to do everything. You could have great results with some of those things, but that's just what I do. I'm just trying to dial in, get the most yield I can out of these little beds, this little space that I have. Oh, nice, the trellis system. Yeah, that video is crazy. I can't believe so many people have watched it. Oh yeah, and that driver, the T-post, yeah, you gotta have one of those. I have not tried the Johnson Sioux method. It looks cool. I'm never like in a rush to make compost. I think a lot of people like want to try to make it faster. I think that's the main draw with the Johnson Sioux. I find that if you have enough compost going, then it doesn't really matter how fast it takes because you only have so many inputs. You know what I mean? Like if you only have like 3 cubic yards of inputs a year, it doesn't really matter how fast it creates it because if you're constantly adding stuff to it, there's always stuff that's finishing. So I have a slower approach to it. We did a couple videos about compost. Gene helps me out a lot with that. So if you, again, go to the search engine, you type in compost, there's one where Gene kind of explains the method. And then there's one where we talk about how we built all the compost bins. Generates some really nice compost for sure. It just takes a little bit longer. But I'm going to do a module about that as well. I've learned quite a bit this year, so. All right, so question here about paper pots. I've never used the paper pot transplanter. I know a lot of people do. I think a lot of people wind up pulling the paper out of the beds when they're done. But again, I don't know. I've never even tried it. Diego's like offered me to check it out, but in my farm here, it's just I can't in my little space. It doesn't make sense for me. I thought about trying to implement it at Raleigh City Farm because we had much more open space, but it just didn't get to that point. So I can't speak from experience on that and how that works. Young guy with very little money. Oh, sorry to hear about that. Okay. As a starting point in terms of crops, I would try to figure out, especially if you're bootstrapping and you really don't have a lot of money, literally figure out what's going to sell and what you can sell and what you get the most amount of money for, and just start with that and just keep doing that over and over again until you get good at it. So I don't know the market in Florida, but I know summertime's brutal, so I don't know what is grown in the summertime in Florida, but the rest of the year, I would try to figure out, like, if you're selling a restaurant or farmer's market, like what's missing, what sells for a lot of money, and just dial down on that. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I've never grown in Florida, so I don't know specifically, like what does well there. Heat-loving crops probably, but depending on your irrigation setup, do you have shade cloth? I don't know what you have for the amount of money that you're talking about. So you could also do, I was just down in Florida during my spring break. I saw a lot of nurseries. It seemed like there was a ton of nurseries. We were driving through this area, and lots of like just plants that are probably getting shipped all around the country or around the world. So maybe a nursery. I'm not really sure. I would take a look at what your market wants to support. That's probably the best thing. Do you have an opinion on the compost meeting the U.S.? I don't know about any of this stuff. Sorry, I don't know. Do you have any place I can learn about suburban orchard building? I'm trying to build both small and medium beds and fruit-bearing trees and bushes. I'm not in that world at all. The only sort of interaction I've had with that was I interviewed Mark Shepard. You've probably heard of him, a big permaculture dude. He has a lot on tree. He does what does he do? Like walnuts and some other fruit, apples. That's the only guy I really know about. I mean, I met Mark and interviewed him. I did a video with Mark. So I don't really have a lot. I don't have a good resource for you on that, unfortunately. Maybe someone else in the chat does. Yeah, I haven't really grown fruit, so. Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, the thing about trellising is you can use whatever you have, There's no rules on this stuff. It's just whatever works. All right, let's see here. You guys have a couple more questions? It's funny, when I was in Florida and we were driving through these areas and I saw this corn growing and my brain didn't really compute. The corn was super tall and it was April and I was like, what's going on? And I just forget, it's just so much warmer. It's crazy when you're growing in a certain region, you don't even, that's what you think. Oh, it's April, so this is kind of what's going on here. And then you go somewhere else and you're like, whoa, you guys are so far ahead. Are you so far behind? So it was really neat to see that. But yeah, it was cool to see, when you're driving around North Carolina, you see the same sort of row crops all the time. And then you go and there's there's a papaya farm. And I was just like, wow, that's so super cool. Or when I went out to California right before COVID, Jesse and I were just staring at all the citrus trees all over the place. All right, let's see here. Couple more questions, guys. I'm here for a little bit longer. Happy to answer any questions you have about whatever I can help with. Oh, Simon, I'm just rereading your question. You were asking about, I thought you meant the paper pot transplanter. I totally misread that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe do you not have access to trays or something? I think that's the best thing about soil blocks is you don't really need trays. You could put them on a piece of wood or screen or anything like that. I would probably recommend that over little things that are gonna break down in the soil. I've seen that for home stuff. People, they sell that at nurseries and Home Depot and stuff. I don't know. I would want it to break down super, super fast because the roots are going to want to shoot out. I think it might impede that a little bit if you're growing a lot of the quick growing stuff that I like to grow, but I haven't tried that. I don't have recommendations for companion planting. As I mentioned before, I don't really do much of that. I've only grown corn once. But I'd say anything that grows quickly you could probably interplant with corn because it takes a little while for it to get big. But it does grow fast, so you could probably grow something else on the side. All right, for kale, my favorite kale is red Russian kale. That's my go-to. It's my favorite in terms of personally like what I like to eat the most. I find that most people around me don't grow it, so it's a unique product. You can grow it baby or full size. And yeah, that's why I like red Russian kale. I love it. I think also for people, if you are, let's say, selling to a farmer's market or if you're doing a CSA box and people are like, oh, I don't know about kale. I mean, kale's kind of like a accepted vegetable at this point. But I think for a while people are like, oh, kale, that's all the hippies are eating that. It's like, whatever. So nowadays, like kale's pretty common. But I found that red Russian kale, I think, was very approachable because it's not as like rough and it's a lot sweeter. So that's what I like. And you can use it for both baby and full size. Same seed. Drip tape timer settings. They change all year, man. All you can do is just like, it depends if you're inside or outside too. So if you're in a tunnel, it's a little bit easier because like what I do is I'll set it for a certain amount, let it run for a couple days, and then I'll just check the soil. If it's too dry, I'll just up it a little bit. If it's too wet, I'll dial it back a little bit. Does that make sense? There is no set it and forget it with farming, and it changes. And if I gave you a number, it doesn't really matter because it's going to change depending on your water pressure, your flow rate, and the drip tape that you get will also have different emitter rates. So there's just too many variables that doesn't really matter what I tell you. I would run it, like pick something consistent, like 30 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, whatever it is, like do it for a couple days and then just put your hand in the soil and see what it feels like and then make adjustments. And then you'll notice like at a certain point in the year, like in the summer, you're going to like, oh crap, I'm definitely not running it long enough because I'll run it for so much time and it's still not very wet. Maybe you have to do a little hand watering or some overhead. So again, use your senses, like put your hand in the soil and actually feel it, and then you'll be able to make adjustments. The cost difference, like, I mean, you're using soil mix for either. I guess in terms of the trays and stuff, I don't know. I think the soil blocking trays, I don't think I've had one break yet. I bought the ones from Johnny's. They tend to last longer than the crappy, like cheap disposable kind of trays that I feel like I get like 3 or 4 plantings with and they fall apart. Like the 128s or whatever size 72s, like those standard ones. I don't think there's much of a cost difference, and if you're on a huge scale, then maybe, but these are things that I don't stress about, like potting mix or starts or seeds. Like to me, those are things that are good compost. Those are things that are good to invest in. If you like, let me have a mini rant here, and it's a little bit of a sidebar. I think a lot of people stress out about these things. I'm not trying to pick on you at all, Blake, about seeds, for example. And a lot of people go, whoa, those tomato seeds or those cucumber seeds are 40 cents a piece. Like there's some specialty cucumber seeds. They will yield you 3 times what the other seeds will yield you. So for an extra, let's say a 10-cent seed versus a 40-cent seed, but it'll yield you 3 times the amount of cucumbers, it seems like a no-brainer to buy the more expensive seed. But some people, when they start, they go, oh, I don't want to spend this much extra money on the seed or on the potting mix or those sorts of things. I always say, like, get the best thing you possibly can. You'll have the best possible results, the least amount of stress, and probably the most profit. In general, the biggest expense for farming is labor. It's not like the material stuff. Like that's why farming is so like people want to get into it because they go, oh, I have land. Like what do I need? Seeds, compost, whatever. It's generally not the stuff, the inputs. It's generally labor. So I don't stress much about like the cost difference there. Like, you know, I'm buying bags of potting mix regardless. But the soil blocker tool is expensive. You know, the stand-up blocker is like $250, but it's a one-time purchase, and I use it all the time. So to me, that's totally worth it. Hopefully, I answer your question, Blake. I don't think there's much of a cost difference in terms of the amount of potting mix. If that's your question, I'm not really sure. I would ask this is about soil toxins. I would ask either an agronomist or if you send in a soil sample, they'll have things they test for. I'm not an expert in that. Pay those guys to tell me. Inside the garden wall, what crops not to plant for turns in terms of space per plant required? Okay, so this will depend on where you are and what you can sell things for, but generally the crops that take the longest to grow are generally not going to be as profitable because you can't have as many flips in there. But there's some exceptions to that. For example, tomatoes take a long time, but you can be very profitable on tomatoes once you get them dialed in because the yields are just incredible. And they usually sell for quite a bit. So generally the longer crops are harder to make money on. You don't see a lot of market gardeners growing things like corn, potatoes, you know, stuff like that that takes a long time and doesn't sell for a lot of money. Those are the crops that I usually recommend. I don't know if church buildings are a crop. That's hilarious, though. Yeah, tomatoes so good. Blake, you said that your market can't support your costs for baby greens. What is your additional labor input for baby? So there's some baby greens they will buy. There's some that they won't. So what I found was, and when I was talking about that, I was talking specifically about kale, I think is what you're referring to. They didn't want baby kale because the chefs that were buying from me didn't want to use it raw in like in a salad or something like that. They wanted kale to cook with. They wanted it as a braising green. And so if I'm going to charge them, you know, like $9, $10 a pound for baby kale and they cook with it, it turns into nothing, right? Baby kale is great as, you know, I'm talking about baby kale specifically as like a salad addition or a garnish or something like that where they don't need a lot of it. And so it's awesome. There are some baby greens that do well, like arugula always sells well. Spinach will sell well that I can grow as a baby green. So it depends on the baby green. The additional labor. The thing about baby greens is the baby green bed flip, which can take up a little bit more time. But if you have a greens harvester, there's not much labor because, you know, it's direct seeded. I direct seed it with the Jang seeder. And then I harvest it with the greens harvester, and I wash it like any other, you know, like leafy green, like lettuce. So for me, it was just a matter of like, what is my, what do my accounts want? And so, yeah, arugula has always done well. Every time I have arugula, people will buy it. I've really considered growing that more often, but I just haven't. As I said, I keep it pretty minimal. But for the baby green situation, I think kale was the one I was talking about. Yeah, red Russian kale, especially in the shoulder seasons and the winter, like you just keep harvesting it and harvesting it. Yeah. I have not had experience growing potatoes, unfortunately. Yep, everyone's echoing the same thing about kale. Aluminum raised beds. I don't have much experience with them. I did get a couple of the Birdies beds. Made a video about that. Kevin at Epic Gardening. Hope maybe you guys know Kevin. He sent me a couple to try out. We're using them sort of as a boundary between my backyard and the tunnels, and we have like beneficial hedgerow kind of stuff planted in there. So I'm not using it for production, but I don't have any actual like raised beds that I grow in, so I don't really have an opinion about that versus wood or blocks or anything like that. But they do go together pretty quickly. Hey, son. Yeah, buy once, cry once. Man, I'm living by that at this point. Especially with camera equipment and stuff. I'm kind of at that point for sure. Hey, if plugs are working for you, don't switch. Like, just because someone else is doing something, whatever. Like, just do what works for you. If plugs are working for you, you enjoy it, you're getting the yields and the output you're looking for, that's all that matters. So, but if you're curious on trying them, you can get a hand blocker for like $40. You can do like a little bit at a time if you just want to try it out. Other than that, you don't need any other equipment. You can use basically any tray as long as it's like got holes in the bottom. Yeah, if you don't have refrigerator space and walk-in cooler, like whatever you harvest has got to go out right away. I don't think in Florida things are going to last very long out in the heat. So make sure you have a way to sell it right away for sure. You are very welcome. All right, it's 4:15, so maybe a couple more questions if you guys have them. I'm in no rush to get out of here, but I don't want to hang out if I'm not being helpful. It's pretty cool to be able to be available for everybody every week. I think that's really neat. So I definitely enjoy this. It's definitely a commitment and time I'm giving up, but I'm happy to be here for everybody. It's really nice to be able to connect. I've said this before, but it's weird. I'm kind of going off subject here, but as a person who creates content and you just like put it out there and you have some comments and look at the numbers, how people watched it and stuff, but then actually be able to connect with people is super nice. It's a weird, being a content creator is weird. Talking to a camera, edit it, put it online, and then interact a little bit. But I don't know. It's nice to be able to take questions and interact. So I do enjoy that. All right, you guys have any more questions coming in about whatever's going on right now? I also feel like I talk too fast and then I get through all the questions and I probably could have answered them in a little more depth, but that's just kind of how I roll. Let's see. Also, if you don't know, I do have another YouTube channel. It's all about videography and content creation and camera gear and stuff. So if you're interested, there should be a link down below. The channel's called Josh Sattin. If you want to check it out, you can see behind the scenes about a lot of stuff I do. I love that. Thank you so much for the kind words. Jesse, what's a great way to reach out to restaurants? Networking. Old school networking. I found cold calls, cold emails, DMs, not going to help so much. It's really like get your foot in the door somewhere, prove yourself, network through those chefs. Maybe restaurants you frequent, start chatting them up. It's get your foot in the door somewhere and then just old school networking. I haven't had great success with like walking in with a box of vegetables and a sell sheet. I've tried it a few times. It wasn't really my jam. I don't know if at that time I just wasn't as confident or whatever, but yeah, for me, a warm handoff is always good. Like, oh, I know someone who works in that restaurant. I know the bartender there. Like, any way you can say, hey, like I'm a farmer. Can I set up a time with a chef, and then make an appointment, bring in all the stuff you have, and go try to impress them and just bring them a whole bunch of stuff. And usually, if you have good food to show them and they agree to meet with you, then you'll do okay for sure. And then just talk to them and figure out the pricing and all that kind of stuff. And be okay telling them like, hey, I'm just getting started. Like, this is what I have. I'm going to try to grow whatever you need. Those kinds of things. So. All right, there's a local church which has a small available acreage, which I'm trying to negotiate a land lease. Any advice? Oh man, I have not had to do this. I know I've heard of a lot of people getting land from churches, either their own church or other people's. You can always, I don't know what problem. What's the hard part of this? Is it approaching them? Is it coming up with a deal? Figuring out the value of it. I mean, it really depends on all the things you're asking for. Like if you're pulling water from them, are you paying for that water? You just have to negotiate all the details. I haven't gone through that myself, but don't offer too much, but make sure, you're listening, saying, hey, what are the benefits? Are they going to have people that maybe they have volunteer groups that want to help out? They're looking for some community activities. Maybe they just want it to look prettier. Maybe there's part of the land that's not being used or taken care of. Maybe you can supply food for some events or some holidays, or you can sell at the church and, be available when people come by for services and things like that. So there's a lot of cool ways to interact with organizations. All right, so I say it's like Christoph. I say this like every video. Lettuce, carrots, and beets are my main crops, and then I grow kale in the winter and patty pan squash in the spring. That's personally that's where it works best for me. Yeah. I also have a video called like top 5 most profitable crops if you want to search for that too, but it's basically that. Oh, look who it is. Thanks, Gene. Jake, yes, I use landscape staples at the end of my drip tape. If you want to look at my irrigation system right now, search for how I water my plants. Type that in the search. I go through all the details there too. But yep, landscape staples. Okay, cool. Glad I answered that. But I think anytime that you are entering an agreement, if it's a social arrangement, if it's a business arrangement, like if you can figure out a way that you can help each other out, like that's a win-win for everybody, right? Like if there's something that they're looking for out of the deal, if they're interested in talking to you, like why are they interested in it? Do they believe in you? Do they just want to help out someone get a business started? Like what, try to figure out how you can give back to them. And if you, it's kind of like everything in life, like the abundance mindset, like just give and give and give, and things generally work out. So remember, there's more than one kind of capital out there other than financial capital. Social capital, I'm a huge believer in. So if you give, then people will be there for you when you need it. So big fan of that. Let's see. You're welcome, Jake. Starting a fellowship with my local market farm near. Oh, you're very welcome. Advice get out of my fellowship. That's a great question, Matthias. So at Raleigh City Farm, we had a total of 6 interns, 3 at the first half of the season and 3 in the second half of the season. And as the person that was being the mentor or being the instructor or whatever you want to call it, I found that it was really helpful towards the end, which I realized was like, make sure that they know, from your point of view, make sure they know what you're looking to get out of it so they can kind of tailor it that way. Like if you're really interested in the business side of it, you're really interested in the growing side of it, you're really interested in the marketing side of it, make sure you're asking questions about what you want to learn so you get the most out of it. I was just sort of, we put together this internship program pretty casually and quickly, like, oh, we need interns. And then I was just like teaching on the fly, like teaching them literally how to farm, like how to flip beds, how to harvest, how to do irrigation, how to do plumbing, tunnels. Like we were just doing all the stuff we were doing on the farm. And I was just like, yeah, come with us. Like, well, I'll teach you how to do all this stuff. But what I realized later is that I wanted to make sure, after we kind of got the farm started and set up and running well, I was like, all right, so how can I really tailor this to the learning of the interns or the fellows? And so we sat down, we chatted. I was like, what else do you guys want me to focus on? And I don't know if everyone else does that, but that really helped make sure that everyone was getting as much out of it as possible. So communication is pretty much the key to everything in life. And also, what else can I say about this? Yeah, make sure you show up and work hard. And, I noticed that like all the interns that, or volunteers that came and put in a lot of effort and showed me that they were like willing to take on responsibility, I would give them more responsibility. Gene mentions that. He's like, yeah, I came by and you were like, yeah, just take care of this. That's cool. And so he was like, what? I was like, yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks for doing that. I know you'll do a good job. And, if people see that you're capable and you're reliable, then you'll get more responsibility and you'll get to try more things and you get to learn more stuff. So I guess those are all my pieces of advice there. You're welcome. All right, Adam. More tunnel questions. Roll up sides. Do you add plastic to the corners to overlap the seams at the end? Okay, yes. If you have like a legit roll up side tunnel, generally the plastic will continue around the corner down the sidewall at least a few feet so that there is an overlap there for the roll up sides. That is like the legit way to do it. I think we had roll up sides. Yeah, we had roll up sides on the high tunnel at Raleigh City Farm. We didn't have that. So it was kind of like a gap in the corner. But that wasn't like a super sealed tunnel. But if you want like a super sealed tunnel, yeah, they're like, if that makes sense, like the end walls, and then they'll wrap around the side a little bit. And then where they're wrapping around the side, the roll up side will overlap with that a little bit. That's I think the super legit way to do it. My tunnels, like they don't do that, but they're Caterpillar tunnels. Like the doors aren't perfectly sealed. Like all the there's so many gaps everywhere. So, it's not like you're getting a perfect seal anyway. So I don't stress about the corners. All right. Cool. Maybe I'll wrap this up for today. I really appreciate everyone showing up today and asking questions and just, coming to learn and hang out. And I do really appreciate it. Remember, we're probably going to continue the course pretty consistently through early July. It's going to be every week for the next, 12 weeks or something. And just module after module, and we'll do live Q&As. So that was, as far as I'm concerned, the only break we'll be taking, and I'll just be cranking away on these videos. So hope you're appreciating that. Make sure you're sharing them with each other and having a good start to your season. Hopefully the snow doesn't stick around too long for you guys up north. I really appreciate everyone out there. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.